What if the boy you mocked for selling Coca-Cola in your school turns out to be your twin brother, and the billionaire your parents never told you about? This is the story of Zavion, a poor teenage boy raised in the slums, who worked at the mechanic shop, begged on the street, and still made it to university against all odds. But what Zavion didn't know was that the boy who laughed at him, the richest and most feared student on campus, was his own blood. A secret buried for 18 years. A sick uncle who held the truth. A limousine, a visa to America, and a $2 million surprise that would shake the entire school. Zavion woke up on a pile of newspapers. It wasn't a bed. It was what was left of the day's work. Torn magazines. Crushed cartons. A wrinkled wedding invitation soaked in last night's rain. He rolled off the heap, wiped his face with the corner of his shirt, and looked around. His uncle was already outside, sorting metals. "Uncle Marku," he called, stretching. "You didn't wake me." "You needed sleep," his uncle replied with a weak smile. "You're still a boy." "I'm 16, Zavion said. "I want to go back to school. I want to do more than pick paper." Uncle Marku didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the rusted weighing scale. The one they used to measure recyclables. It was older than Zavion. It didn't work properly, but it told them how hungry they would be that day. Zavion squatted beside him. "Please, Uncle," he whispered. "Let me go back to school." Uncle Marku's hands trembled. He pulled out a torn envelope from his shirt pocket, the school admission letter from last year. "I tried," he said. "But I couldn't even pay the registration. So I used the money to buy bread and beans. I'm sorry." Zavion nodded. No tears. He was used to it. That was their life. That night, he made a decision. He would work one more year. Then, he would find a way out. 1 year passed. Zavion worked harder than ever, collecting plastic bottles, metal scraps, and old electric parts. He saved every naira he could. Then one day, a banner appeared on the gate of a big school in town. Scholarship for Unprivileged Children, sponsored by the Kingsbury Foundation. Uncle Marku read it aloud 3 times. Zavion's heart pounded. "Do you think I can try?" "You must," his uncle said. "This might be your destiny knocking." They used N400 to print copies of his handwritten essays. They borrowed a shirt from a neighbor. And Zavion applied. He waited weeks. Then one morning, while washing aluminum cans, a motorcycle rode into the slum. A man in branded t-shirt handed Zavion an envelope. "Congratulations. You have been selected." Zavion screamed. He ran and hugged his uncle. They both cried. That night, they bought 1,500 Nigerian nairas worth of bushmeat, a feast in their world. They laughed and ate with trembling hands. Uncle Marku kept half the scholarship stipend, just enough for food for a month. Zavion was going to school. He never felt so rich. But somewhere in the city, in a mansion glowing with marble floors and glass stairs, Henry, Zavion's unknown twin brother, was polishing his Prado Jeep. He had just wasted 400,000 Nigerian nairas on grilled chicken at a VIP restaurant. His father, Chief Raymond Kingsbury, had sent him 5 million to invest. He didn't. He ordered perfumes, clothes, and 2 iPhones instead. Henry was the boy with everything, except sense. He didn't know that the boy his father just gave a scholarship to, the boy celebrating with bushmeat, was his own twin brother. Zavion kept working part-time, even while in school. On weekends, he helped his uncle sort recyclables. On weekdays after school, he sold cold Coke in traffic using a rented cooler. One evening, a black SUV stopped near his tray. 3 well-dressed boys, probably rich, asked for 6 bottles. He quickly packed them, smiling. "That'll be 1,800 Nigerian nairas," he said. They laughed. Then the car sped off, leaving him in dust and shame. He stared at the empty cooler. The Coke wasn't his. Now, he owed money. He walked home slowly. Uncle Marku was fixing a broken fan. Zavion dropped the empty cooler beside him and sat on the floor. "What happened?" the old man asked. "I got cheated." Uncle didn't say anything. He just looked at the boy, then at the cooler, then at the darkness above them. They were quiet for a long time. Zavion finally said, "One day, I'll drive a car like that. But I'll never cheat anyone." Uncle smiled faintly. "You will, my boy. You will. Maybe, you'll drive a better one." But what neither of them knew was this. That exact car, the black Prado Jeep, belonged to Zavion's twin brother. And fate was slowly bringing the truth to light. The first time Zavion stepped into the university campus, he couldn't believe it was real. Tall buildings. Tidy roads. A cafeteria bigger than any house he'd ever seen. Students in fine clothes with laptops, headsets, and confidence. He clutched his admission file tightly, holding it like a trophy. This was no longer the slum. This was the beginning of his dream. Uncle Marku gave him a small bag, 2 shirts, 2 trousers, a notebook, and 5,000 Nigerian nairas wrapped in a black nylon. "Keep this for emergencies," he had said, his voice shaking. Zavion hugged him for a long time before leaving for school. He didn't cry. He had cried enough. 2 weeks after Zavion resumed, the campus buzzed with noise and camera flashes. A black Prado Jeep with tinted glass pulled up outside the admin block. Music blasted from the speakers. Girls gathered. Boys stared. The car door opened. Out stepped Henry Kingsbury. Wearing a designer shirt, white sneakers, and a wristwatch that could pay someone's school fees for a year. "Kingsbury boy is here," someone shouted. "Billionaire Pekin on land." He walked with pride, tossing car keys at a valet like he was in a hotel. 2 assistants followed him, carrying his luggage. He wasn't looking for friends. He expected people to follow him. And they did. Meanwhile, Zavion was sitting on the floor in the library hallway, waiting for a broken chair to be repaired so he could study. He had gotten used to reading while sitting cross-legged with his back against the wall. 1 notebook. 1 pen. And a small bottle of water to keep him going. He saw the crowd pass. He saw the Jeep. He didn't care. He was used to big cars passing him by. But what he didn't know was that the boy who stepped out of that Jeep had his eyes, his jawline, his blood. His own twin brother. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed without meaning. Henry was everywhere the noise was. Zavion was everywhere the silence was. Dare's name was printed on party posters. Zavion's name was quietly pinned on the scholarship board as one of the top-performing freshmen. Henry drove past Zavion 3 times and never noticed. One day, Zavion was carrying old books to sell for money when Henry and his friends sped past in the Prado, splashing dirty water on him. Henry didn't even look back. Zavion didn't complain. He simply wiped the mud off his only trousers, dusted the books, and kept walking. One Friday evening, something strange happened. Zavion was waiting at the back of the lecture hall, collecting old plastic bottles to sell after classes. He had a sack. He was tired. As he bent to pick another bottle, a voice behind him said, "Why are you picking that? Do you work for the cleaners?" He turned. It was Henry. Zavion stood straight, surprised at how much they looked alike, except Dare's face was brighter, fuller, spoiled. "I recycle," Zavion said softly. "For what?" Henry laughed. "You get paid for picking trash?" Zavion nodded. "Yes. It helps me eat." Henry raised his brows, then brought out a 1,000 Nigerian nairas note from his pocket. "Take," he said. "You look like you need it." Zavion didn't move. "I'm not begging," he said gently. "Suit yourself." Henry shrugged and walked off. Zavion watched him go. He didn't take the money. But the feeling stuck. Something about that boy felt familiar. Later that night, Zavion opened his phone and scrolled through the school's website. The scholarship sponsors were listed. Chief Raymond Kingsbury, CEO of Kingsbury Group. Zavion stared at the photo. It was a clean-shaven man in a navy blue suit. He looked like someone from the news, not real life. Zavion closed his eyes and tried to imagine his own father. He never could. "Maybe this man saved me," he whispered. "Maybe, one day, I'll thank him in person." He didn't know. That man was already thinking about his own son, Henry, and how tired he was of his arrogance. Chief Raymond sat in his study that night, holding a drink and shaking his head. "Henry is wasting his life," he muttered. "Spoilt, lazy, careless. What did I do wrong? By mid-semester, the results of the first departmental test were pasted. Students gathered around the board, whispering, laughing, pointing. Phones were out. Names were flying. Memes were already being created. At the bottom of the result list, the final name, in red ink. Kingsbury, Henry, 17,100. One student gasped dramatically, 17? From a billionaire's son? Another added, is it by Prado? Not book. The news spread faster than wildfire. Billionaire's son scored the lowest. The boy with gold chain no sabai anything. He should bribe the lecturer with his father's money. Henry was humiliated. For the first time in his life, money didn't fix it. He walked into class the next day, and the laughter felt louder. He tried to act like he didn't care, but it burned. He entered the lecture hall with his headphones on, but he didn't press play. He just needed to block the noise. But he couldn't block the shame. He sat at the back, watching others take notes. He didn't understand half of what the lecturer said. Not because he was stupid, but because he never tried. And now, it was catching up with him. That evening, Henry went to the library. For the first time. He walked in, confused, lost, and annoyed. The smell of old books and silence made him feel like he didn't belong. He looked around, then saw a familiar face. Zavion. Sitting alone by the window. Reading a brown-covered chemistry textbook, surrounded by a few notes. Henry hesitated. His pride fought his curiosity. But eventually, he walked up to him. Hey, Henry said quietly, pulling out a chair. You're Zavion, right? Zavion looked up, calm. Yes. Henry sat without invitation. He looked embarrassed. You were in our test group? Yes. You passed? I got 88. Henry blew air through his teeth and leaned back. Wow. That's a lot. Zavion didn't smile. He turned another page. Henry lowered his voice. I need help. I mean, like, badly. Zavion looked at him now. You want me to teach you? Yeah. Just, small. Maybe a few hours. After you read your own first, of course. Zavion thought for a moment. All right. I'll help. Thanks, man, Henry said, actually sounding grateful. But as soon as he said it, trouble walked in. 3 of Dare's rich friends, the same ones who partied with him, wore matching sneakers, and always laughed the loudest, entered the library. They saw him seated beside Zavion. One of them, Tochi, raised an eyebrow. Henry Kings. Who you day read with like that? The second, Remy, scoffed. N.A. the coke seller now. The third, Tolu, laughed loudly. UWN learn book from person we day hawk coke for road. The table went silent. Zavion slowly closed his book. Henry looked uncomfortable. Tochi continued, Guy, leave this trash now. You know day shame? He go teach you wetting? How to chase car for N50? Henry didn't say anything. He looked down. Zavion stood up, calm but firm. I may sell coke, he said slowly, but I passed the test. You didn't. If that makes me a teacher, so be it. Remy laughed harder. Guy de Pararo. Tolu added, Abeg dare, stand up Joa. Let's go somewhere we belong. Henry hesitated for a moment, then slowly picked up his bag. Without a word, he walked away from Zavion and followed his friends. Zavion watched him leave. He wasn't surprised. He'd been bullied by pride many times. He sat down and kept reading. That night, Henry couldn't sleep. His friends were still mocking him in their group chat. Screenshots of his 17,100 were now all over campus. But what stayed with him most was Zavion's eyes. He had seen something in them, something he lacked. Hunger. Focus. Humility. Henry had none of those. He had a Prado, but Zavion had purpose. He had a Rolex, but Zavion had results. He had followers, but Zavion had a future. And worst of all, he couldn't stop thinking. Why do we look alike? The next morning, Zavion was carrying empty bottles out of the hostel to sell when someone tapped his shoulder. He turned. It was Dare. He didn't have his pride on. He looked serious. "I'm sorry about yesterday," Henry said. "They are fools. I should have spoken up." Zavion nodded. "No hard feelings." Henry looked around. "You still reading at the library today?" "Yes." "Can I come?" Zavion smiled faintly. "Sure. But this time, you bring your own book." Zavion's phone rang during a quiet study session. It was the neighbor from home. "Zavion, your uncle is very sick. He collapsed this morning. We tried palm oil, nothing worked. We don't know what's wrong." Zavion's heart froze. He stood up, grabbed his bag, and left the library without a word. That evening, he took the last 3,000 Nigerian nairas he had saved and boarded a bus to the slum, that same neighborhood where he and Uncle Marku used to pick recyclables. By the time he arrived, it was almost dark. He ran into their small wooden house. There, lying on the floor on a thin mat, was Uncle Marku. Breathing shallow. Pale. Sweating. "Uncle!" Zavion knelt beside him, shaking. "I'm here. You'll be fine." The old man opened his eyes slowly and tried to smile. "My boy, you came." Zavion held his hand and wept. He asked the neighbors, "Where's the clinic?" "There's none here good enough," one replied. "The closest decent one is 3 towns away. And even there, they might not handle it." Zavion bit his lip. His hands trembled. His uncle had raised him like a son. This man had fed him, clothed him, and never told him he wasn't his real child. Now, he was fading. Zavion took out his phone, the small one he used for school. He had only one option. He scrolled to Henry's number. Then dialed. Henry was just about to take his evening shower when he saw the call. "Zavion." He picked up. "Hello." Zavion's voice cracked. "Please, I need your help. My uncle is dying. I have no money. No transport. No hospital. I don't want to lose him." Dare's heart dropped. He didn't speak for a second. Then said, "Send me your location." An hour later, the Prado Jeep pulled into the slum. Children screamed and ran after it. People gathered. Henry stepped out, wearing jeans and a plain shirt, no crew, no noise. Zavion stood there, dirty from travel, eyes red from crying. "This way," he said. They carried Uncle Marku into the backseat. Zavion held him as they drove off. The night was long. The first hospital rejected them. No power supply. No oxygen. "Try the state hospital," the nurse said. The state hospital had no bed space. "Come back tomorrow." Zavion's lips trembled. He might not make it till morning. Henry looked at him, then looked at the man lying unconscious in the car. "I know one place," he said. Zavion turned. "Where?" "It's far. It's expensive. But it's my dad's hospital." Zavion blinked. "What?" Henry started the engine. "The best doctors are there. I'll explain later." They sped off. By 1:47 a.m., they arrived at Kingsbury Medical Suites, a world-class hospital with glass doors, marble floors, and security guards in crisp uniforms. They brought out Uncle Marku. Nurses rushed forward with a stretcher. "No deposit, no treatment," the receptionist said coldly. Henry stepped forward, pulled out his ID card, and said, "My name is Henry Kingsbury. This man is with me." The receptionist froze. "I'll call the chief admin," she said quickly. "No need. Just call the doctors." They rushed Uncle Marku in. Zavion stood there, lost in the whiteness of the hallway. This was a hospital he'd once seen on TV. Now, his dying uncle was inside. All because of the boy who once laughed at him for picking bottles. At 3:15 a.m., a doctor came out. "He's stable. He'll need to stay for a few days. Food poisoning. And he's weak. But he'll live." Zavion dropped to his knees and sobbed. Henry sat beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did well," he said. Zavion wiped his eyes. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." Henry smiled. "You already did. You're the only reason I started reading." They both sat in silence. But as Zavion stood up to stretch his legs, something caught his eye. A large wall mural. Founder, Chief Raymond Kingsbury, visionary. Father. Lifesaver. Zavion stared at the image. Same face from the scholarship website. Same man who funded his dream. Same man who just saved his uncle. And suddenly, it hit him like a thunderbolt in his chest. What if? Before he could finish the thought, a nurse walked past him. She stopped suddenly, turned, and stared at him. Then at Dare. Then back at Zavion. You two look shockingly alike, she said. Henry laughed awkwardly. Yeah. People say that sometimes. The nurse nodded slowly. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and fresh fear. Zavion sat on the hard bench outside the intensive care unit, his head bowed, his fingers tightly locked together in prayer. Henry stood by the window, staring at the sun slipping behind the trees. His phone buzzed. It was his mother again. Dare, her voice came sharp, as always. The visa is ready. Book your ticket. You leave for the US next week. He didn't respond. Did you hear me? Yes, Mima. I heard. He cut the call. He turned to Zavion. Any update? Zavion shook his head. They're still running tests. They had rushed the uncle here 2 nights ago, after a long drive from the rural area. The private hospital, one of the most expensive in the region, belonged to Dare's father, a man Zavion had never met but heard powerful whispers about. That night, Henry had used his father's name to secure immediate treatment. The doctors had bowed, nurses had cleared paths, and the uncle had been taken in without a deposit. Zavion had never felt more helpless and grateful at once. But while the uncle fought for his life, the world outside moved on. A few days later, back on campus, something unexpected happened. Zavion's name appeared boldly on the school notice board, top first-year student. Dean's Honors List. Winner of the Chancellor's Academic Excellence Award. A full scholarship extension. A 500,000 Nigerian Naira's cash prize. A campus-wide celebration. Henry was the first to hug him. Bro, you did it. But behind the laughter, the whispers had already begun. Isn't that the Coke seller guy? Maybe he bribed someone. Wait, how can a guy from the slums beat everyone? And then came the blow. 2 days before the award ceremony, Zavion was called to the dean's office. We're investigating a case of academic misconduct, the dean said flatly. An anonymous tip suggests you had access to the exam questions before the test. Zavion blinked. That's a lie, sir. It's under investigation. Until then, your award is suspended. Outside the office, Zavion's shoulders slumped. He walked slowly toward the hostel. A storm was building inside him. Meanwhile, across town, something bigger was unraveling. Henry sat in the living room of their mansion when he noticed the television change from a music channel to breaking news. Breaking, CEO of Goldcore Holdings, Raymond Kingsbury, arrested in multi-billion naira embezzlement scandal. Properties sealed. Company assets frozen. Henry stared at the screen. His father's face was blurred in handcuffs, escorted into a van by stern-looking police. The room spun. His phone rang. It was Zavion. Did you see the news? Zavion asked. I did. There was silence. Then Zavion added, I'm sorry. Henry didn't respond. He couldn't. 3 days passed. On campus, Zavion was now an object of ridicule. Students pointed at him, laughed, whispered. Cheater. Fraud. Smart my foot. Henry returned to campus, his face heavy. The news of his father's arrest had spread like wildfire. His rich friends had all disappeared like shadows at sunrise. The jokes had flipped, from Zavion the Coke boy to Henry the fallen prince. In the hostel, Henry found Zavion hunched over his books. You're still studying? Henry asked. Zavion looked up. His eyes were tired. If they're going to call me a fraud, let it not be true next time. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, Henry said. Zavion blinked. For what? For not standing by you. I knew you earned it. I should have defended you. Zavion nodded, then offered a weak smile. We both know life's not fair. But we don't stop walking. Henry sat beside him. Zavion, I think we need to do something. What? Clear your name. That weekend, Henry used what remained of his family connections to speak to the new interim school registrar. They pulled out all records, checked the exam hall CCTV, traced logins on the school portal. It took a few long days, but finally, the truth came out. The anonymous tip had come from a student who was second in the class, and jealous. All the evidence cleared Zavion completely. The dean called him again. We deeply regret the delay. Congratulations, Zavion. The award ceremony is tomorrow. Zavion didn't smile. The hall was full. Students, lecturers, and even external guests gathered as Zavion walked up to receive his award. There was a brief standing ovation. But Zavion took the mic and said something unexpected. I dedicate this to everyone who has ever been told they are too poor to succeed. To everyone who's been laughed at for where they came from. To everyone carrying a name with no weight, make your name mean something. Tears filled some eyes. The hall erupted. Henry stood at the back, clapping hard. That night, back at the hostel, Henry handed Zavion an envelope. What's this? The prize money, Henry said. From the award. Zavion frowned. But why are you giving me? You gave your own away, Henry said, smiling. To your uncle's bills. This is mine now. Take it. Zavion stared at him. You know what? You're not the same person I met in the library months ago. Neither are you, Zavion. But just as they both laughed, Dare's phone rang. It was his mother. He picked up. Dare, she said hurriedly. There's still one thing your father did before the arrest. He secured your US visa. You leave in 2 weeks. His hand froze. Zavion was watching him. I don't know if I want to go anymore, Henry muttered. His mother's voice cracked. You must go. If you don't, you lose everything. Henry ended the call, his eyes locked with Zavion's. He was torn between two worlds, the one he came from and the one he'd found. The final semester at university was supposed to be a quiet one for Zavion. He had paid his dues, from the endless mockery in his first year to the silent battles with hunger and shame. But on this particular morning, everything was different. The university gates were unusually crowded. Cameras. Microphones. Security. A long black limousine with gold trims and fluttering national flags rolled in, escorted by 2 white Range Rovers. Everyone turned. Even Zavion looked up from the bench under the mango tree beside the law faculty. He was holding a flask of warm water and Gary, his usual brunch when nothing else was affordable. As the door of the limousine opened, a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out. The crowd murmured. Isn't that Chief Oladil Akinbami? The billionaire construction mogul. Dare's father? Zavion's eyes narrowed. Why was he here? A boy in ripped jeans and a white designer shirt, wearing black sunglasses, jumped out of the second vehicle and ran toward the mango tree. It was Dare. Zavion! Dare shouted. Zavion stood, confused. What was happening? Bro, please, you need to come with me. Now. Zavion stared. Come with you? Where? Dare's face was flustered. His usual pride melted into pure panic. My father came to pick me up. He wants to meet you. Please, Zavion, don't say no. Please. Zavion hesitated, lifting his threadbare backpack from the floor. Suddenly, Chief Oladil walked across the crowd, his gold wristwatch flashing under the sun. Journalists followed, recording every step. Students watched in frozen amazement. Then, the chief stood directly in front of Zavion. His eyes locked on the boy's face. The air shifted. Your name is Zavion? Zavion blinked. Yes, sir. The chief removed his sunglasses and stared again. A strange light entered his eyes, like he had seen a ghost. Or a memory. Jesus, he muttered. Zavion, do you know who your mother is? The chief asked. Zavion shook his head slowly. I was raised by my uncle. He said my mother dropped me off when I was a baby. Do you have a birthmark on your left shoulder? the chief asked, voice trembling. Zavion hesitated, then nodded. Yes, a dark crescent moon. The chief staggered. Zavion, he whispered, you're my son. A journalist screamed. Breaking news. The billionaire has found his long-lost son. Students screamed. Even Dare froze in shock. What? Zavion asked, breath leaving his chest. You're Dare's twin brother. You were stolen at birth. The hospital confessed it years ago, but we couldn't trace you. Your mother almost died from grief. His voice cracked. Dare stumbled back, mouth open. You're my twin. Zavion's heart thudded like thunder in a tin roof. I'm your brother. Just then, a beautiful woman in a purple lace gown stepped out of the limousine. Her headgear sparkled under the sun. She rushed forward, tears spilling from her eyes. Zavion, she cried. Zavion, my son. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Students watched with teary eyes. Dare stepped forward, shame written all over his face. Zavion. I mocked you. I judged you. I didn't know. Zavion looked at him, eyes kind. You couldn't have known. We were both victims of time. Dare hugged him tightly. Forgive me, bro. Please. The moment was too big to describe. Cameras clicked endlessly. A popular influencer went live on TikTok, two twins separated at birth, reunited under a mango tree on campus. Later that evening, a private helicopter flew Zavion and Dare to their father's estate. But before they landed, Zavion whispered to his father. I have to go to the village. There's someone I must see. Chief Oladiel nodded. A second chopper was dispatched to the rural town. Zavion stepped down, wearing a brand new suit. His uncle, the man who raised him from the dirt, who gave him his only pair of school shoes, who sold old motorcycle scraps to buy him textbooks, was sitting in front of his mud house, coughing heavily. Zavion knelt before him, tears in his eyes. Uncle, I'm home. The old man gasped. Zavion. A limo pulled up behind the chopper. Out stepped Chief Oladiel and his wife. The old man struggled to his feet, frightened. Zavion held him. Don't be afraid. These are my parents. They came to thank you. Chief Oladiel stepped forward, voice thick with emotion. Sir, you raised my son like your own. You gave him dignity. I am forever in your debt. He handed the uncle a briefcase. Inside was a signed check of $2 million. The old man opened it, and fainted. They revived him with water and laughter. I'm going to build you a mansion, uncle. You'll never lack again, Zavion said, holding his wrinkled hands. 2 months later, Zavion and Dare stood side by side in matching suits, boarding the private jet to Oxford University, one of the best schools in London. Their names had already gone viral across Africa. Everywhere they went, people whispered, "Those are the billionaire twins." But more interestingly, people respected Zavion more. Not because he had money, but because he had earned it before he ever knew he was born into it. Even Dare now looked up to him, following him everywhere, asking him how to plan, budget, and stay humble. On the day they arrived at Oxford, a British reporter asked, "Mr. Zavion, if you could go back in time to that mango tree with the Gary flask, would you change anything?" Zavion smiled gently. "No. Because that pain built me. And I'm proud of who I became, not by the father I found, but by the uncle who raised me." The video trended for weeks. Zavion would later launch the Uncle Project, a scholarship program for street kids and orphans. His first building was named Uncle's House of Hope. Dare became the ambassador. Their father invested over $50 million into youth education across Nigeria. And as for Zavion, every time he saw a boy selling cold Coke on the street, he didn't look away. He walked up and bought 2 bottles. And always said, "I used to be you."